The streetlight was still buzzing when I stepped out for the paper and saw an official notice slapped across my mailbox declaring my driveway off limits effective immediately. She, the HOA president, had decided overnight that what I'd poured concrete for 30 years ago was suddenly off limits. My cousin, a county prosecutor, looked over the bylaws and the stamped seal, and he moved fast, freezing their bank accounts before they could touch another dollar. That morning was only the beginning. Let me take you back. The streetlight was still humming when I stepped out for the paper and saw the envelope taped to my mailbox, bright official, impossible to miss. I peeled it free with the kind of care you use on a bandage and read the black type twice, then once more to make sure the letters hadn't rearranged themselves overnight. Effective immediately. You may not use your driveway. Ellen, I called, keeping my voice even. You'll want to see this. She came out in her robe and slippers, eyes still soft from sleep, the cicadas sawing away under the lamp like a cheap orchestra warming up. What kind of notice, she asked. HOA, I said. They've banned our own driveway. She pressed her lips together. That can't be right. It's signed by the board. Effective immediately. I turned the page over as if the punchline might be on the back. Nothing there but the tape's residue and the faint smell of toner. Let's read the bylaw number, she said. There isn't one. Just pending safety review. Ellen looked down the street toward the clubhouse, a single light glowing in the window. We'll talk to them at 9, she said, before the day gets away from us. I nodded, though my hands had already curled around the envelope the way they might around a steering wheel that suddenly refuses to turn. The porch swing creaked behind us. A mourning dove landed on the line, thought better of it, and lifted off. I parked there last night, I said, voice low. Same as the last 30 years. She reached for my arm. Ray, breathe. I'm breathing, I said. I'm just not driving. We made coffee and sat on the swing with the notice between us like a third-place setting. The paper caught the light in a way that made the seal look more serious than it deserved. I traced the tiny boundary marker at the corner of our lot, just a dot in the margin on an old plat now apparently the center of the world. At 8:45, we walked to the clubhouse. The bulletin board outside was already cluttered pool rules choir rehearsal, lost cat with one ear, and right in the center, the HOA agenda printed on stiff cardstock. I tapped it with my knuckle. Public comment, I asked the receptionist. 3 minutes each, she said without looking up. Sign-up sheet is full. I don't need 3 minutes, I said. I need my driveway. She flipped a page. You can submit a written statement. Like this, I held up the notice. Sir, you'll need to email the board. Ellen put a hand on my sleeve. Let's talk to Linda, she said. She told me last winter she wanted to keep things neighborly. Linda Carver swept out from the conference room in a coral blazer that had never seen a barn. Ray, she said, bright as a TV morning show. We're on a tight agenda. Linda, I said, who taped this to my mailbox? The compliance chair, she said. Routine, temporary like an evening. Or temporary like it never leaves. We just need to make sure sight lines are safe near the corner, she said. Your shrubs are vigorous. My shrubs haven't moved in 10 years, I said. Neither has my driveway. Standards evolve, she said. Don't take it personally, it's a driveway. You don't take it, period. Her smile thinned. Please email the board if you'd like to be heard. Today's business is full. Your paper says effective immediately, I said. That's today's business. Ellen stepped closer. Linda, this feels like punishment. Ellen, we're protecting the aesthetic, she said. We have to think of the whole. The whole starts with the parts I said. We're apart. A man in a navy polo opened the conference room door. We're starting, he said. Linda said already moving, submit your statement by email. We'll review it carefully. I held up the envelope. This is my statement. The door clicked shut between us. We stayed in the lobby with 3 other neighbors who pretended not to listen. I read the notice again. There was no bylaw, cited, no reference number, just 4 lines that added up to the same thing. My hand pinched the corner until a whisper of paper tore. Ellen pointed to the bulletin board to a blank space where a flyer's pushpin left a clean hole. We'll put our statement there after the meeting, she said. If they won't hear you, they'll still see you. I don't like making a show, I said. Then make a record. 9:45. The door opened and the board poured out with the smell of coffee and perfumed hand sanitizer. I stepped forward. 2 sentences I said to the meeting chair, Arthur, who wore a tie for authority and sneakers for comfort. I live on Maple Street. You taped a notice that takes my driveway. Sir, he said gently, we have a process. I know processes, I said. I used to audit them. They usually come with numbers. We'll look into it, he said. Please email the board. I'd like the floor for 60 seconds. Arthur glanced at Linda. She shook her head. The list is full, he said. You can bump me, said a neighbor in a ball cap near the door. Let the man speak. Arthur's eyes cut again to Linda. Her smile stayed in place like a combed lawn that refuses a single stray blade. Not today, she said. I swallowed. My mouth tasted like tin. Then I'll submit the notice, I said, and slid it onto the receptionist's desk face up where everyone could read the line that had emptied my chest. Back home, the cicadas were louder, as if noon had turned the knob. I stood with Ellen at the edge of the driveway and looked at it the way you look at a photograph of your younger self, recognizable but with something missing you can't quite name. What now? She asked. We don't yell, I said. We don't block. We write. We ask for the plat. We collect their emails. We make a file thicker than a sermon. She managed a small smile. And we keep a little dignity. Dignity doesn't have a file number, I said, but it leaves a trail. The porch swing gave a soft complaint as we sat again, our knees touching the envelope now smoothed flat beneath my palm. I watched a car roll past at the speed of someone who owns the road and has never thought to question it. The mailbox cast a shadow like a sundial, a thin wedge moving slowly toward afternoon. Ellen said after a long minute of the cicadas and the far-off lawnmower and the clink of cooling metal. You know what you said once about concrete? I nodded. A driveway isn't just concrete, it's dignity. She squeezed my hand, and for a moment we let the silence hold us like a room with the lights off. The hummingbird came to the feeder and buzzed away. A cloud moved, and the light shifted. The world kept its schedule, even if mine had been rewritten without my permission. By late afternoon I had 3 drafts of a statement and a half-dozen lines I was proud of, and not one that changed anything. We walked back to the clubhouse before closing and pinned a typed page to the bulletin board with a blue pushpin from Ellen's purse. I signed it with my name, our address, and the date. In the lobby, the receptionist didn't look up. Email the board, she recited. I did, I said. I'll bring cookies next time. Make them compliant, she said, and for the first time all day, I almost laughed. Ellen said gently, tugging at my sleeve. Let's go home. We stepped outside into the thin evening. A choir rehearsal filtered from the church across the green sopranos, searching for the note tenors anchoring the center. I listened a moment, then looked back at the clubhouse door closed and bright with the kind of light you can't see through. Tomorrow, Ellen said. Tomorrow, I agreed, and we turned toward Maple Street, toward the rectangle of concrete waiting for orders it had never needed before. For 30 years it was mine, and tonight it was not. The county office smelled of floor polish and dust. Clerk Dobbins, his tie askew, slid a plastic sleeve toward me across the counter. Inside sat a certified plat map, the kind that looked like it hadn't been touched since the subdivision went up. Square lots, neat numbers, and then the part that stole my breath, a dotted line cutting across the width of my driveway. Recorded 2020. Dobbins said, "Agricultural easement, 10 feet wide." 10 feet through my concrete, I asked. He adjusted his glasses, tapping the page. Access only. Utilities county vehicles. Non-exclusive. Non-exclusive doesn't mean mine disappears. He offered the kind of shrug you get from men who've explained something one too many times. Depends how your HOA interprets it. I leaned on the counter. The hum of fluorescent lights pressed in like static. There's nothing here that says I can't park where I've always parked. He gave me the seal. Certified copy for $5. I paid and slid the paper back toward me. The blue stamp gleamed like authority with no memory. In the foyer, I sat on the worn wooden bench and spread the plat across my knees. My phone buzzed. New email. From HOA Secretary. Subject, temporary, driveway. Restriction, safety. Review. I opened it, hoping for clarity. Instead, please refrain from using your driveway pending board determination. Overnight parking on the street is temporarily required. No bylaw number. No statute. Just adjectives harmonious, safe aesthetic. The word discretion showed up twice. I pinched the screen until the letters blurred. A shadow crossed me. June lowered herself onto the bench, clutching a manila envelope like a shield. "Ray," she whispered. "They got you too. They drew a dotted line through my driveway," I said, pointing at the map. "They fined me over a garden gnome," she said, 2 inches too tall. Harmony clause. "Precedent for lawn ornaments," I muttered. "That's new?" She gave a half laugh. "You going to fight it? I'm going to record it," I said. Line by line. We walked together to the post office. The brick front looked the same as it had when I was a boy mailing letters with my father flag whipping in the Indiana wind. Inside, June slid her appeal across the counter. "Certified. Return receipt." "Garden gnome?" the clerk asked. June nodded. "Scale violation." The clerk stamped with a sigh. Thunk. Thunk. Then it was my turn. I passed over my 1-page statement, 3 questions stapled to a copy of the plat. "Certified, too," I said. The clerk slid a green label across. I signed my name like I was swearing an oath. Back outside, June squinted toward the courthouse. "They always say, rules are rules," she said. "Rules start with nouns," I said, "not adjectives." She laughed again, this time sad. "See you at the meeting." At home, Ellen was at the kitchen table with 2 mugs. I spread the plat beside the mailbox notice. One line overlapped the other. Together, they spelled out a kind of theft polite enough to fit on letterhead. "They emailed again," she said, sliding her phone toward me. The message chirped gentle reminder. My jaw tightened. "Street parking required until review completes." Ellen touched the boundary pin on the plat. "Does that dot change anything?" "It changes how they talk," I said. "And how we'll answer." I wrote in the margin. Plat 2020. Access only, not prohibition. My handwriting slanted determined. When I set the pen down, Ellen squeezed my hand. "A line on paper can erase a lifetime of use," I told her. She nodded. "Then let's make lines of our own." I slipped the documents into a thin folder that didn't look like much yet. The fluorescent hum still lived in my ears, steady as a metronome, keeping time for a fight that had just begun. That dotted line was the HOA's weapon, not mine. "Ray, my cousin Matthew said over pancakes you're being boxed in by paper, not people." The diner buzzed with the late morning crowd. Coffee mugs clinked, a choir rehearsal flyer curled on the bulletin board by the door, and the smell of fried bacon clung to the red vinyl booths. Steam rose off our pancakes, ghosting in the air between us. I watched it twist and fade before I spoke. "I thought neighbors mattered," I said. "Turns out ink and adjectives matter more." Matthew leaned in, lowering his voice. "Exactly. They've decided to use bylaws as weapons, which means you stop arguing feelings and start keeping records." I slid the folded HOA letter across the table. He read silently, brow tightening. "Pending safety review. Overnight parking required." "See here," he said, tapping a line with his fork. "No statute, no citation. Just in the board's discretion." "That's thin ice legally." I sighed. "Thin ice can still break ankles. Not if you know where to step." He pulled a pen from his jacket and began sketching numbers on the back of a napkin. Statute subsections. Tiny arrows pointing to phrases like reasonable access and non-exclusive easement. "Paperwork is a fence no SUV can drive through," he said. I chuckled. "Viral poster material right there." His eyes met mine. "Don't laugh it off. They boxed you with paper, so you box them back. Deeds, seals, certified notices. It's the only fence they respect." I cut into the pancake, though it tasted like paste. So I start gathering. You document everything. Photos, receipts, timestamps. Every time they send a letter, you send one back certified. Every board refusal, you record the denial. Build a stack higher than their clubhouse flagpole. The word clubhouse landed heavy. It wasn't just where they met, it was where they paraded authority. He kept drawing lines, statutes blooming across the napkin like blue veins. "You have a deed, don't you?" "Original seal. In the strongbox," I said. "Good. That's prop one, prop. Think of it as your anchor. That deed is older than their covenants. A judge sees a seal, not a pink SUV." Steam lifted again from the pancakes, thin and fleeting. I let silence sit there. The choir board on the wall listed Sunday's hymn, "Blessed Assurance." I wanted assurance, blessed or not. "What if they laugh it off?" I asked finally. Matthew leaned back, sipped his coffee, and studied me. "They won't laugh when you send a certified package with the county recorder's seal attached. They'll sweat." Ellen slid into the booth, cheeks flushed from the cold outside. She nodded to Matthew. "You giving him a sermon? More like a defense strategy," he said, sliding the HOA letter to her. She read quickly, lips tightening. "They don't even bother to quote the bylaws. That's what I told him," Matthew said. "They're overreaching." Ellen glanced at me. "So we push back." "With records," Matthew answered. "Not shouting. They'll expect shouting. Give them notarized calm instead." The three of us sat with the quiet clink of utensils around us. The diner's jukebox shifted into a gospel track soft enough to blend with the hiss of the griddle. I leaned forward. "Then it's settled. I start tonight." Matthew folded the napkin, sliding it toward me like contraband. "Keep this. It's not fancy, but it's a map. Start with the deed, Ray. That's your prop, your proof. If they say your driveway isn't yours, you show them the seal that says otherwise." "Feels like loading ammunition," I said. "Feels like locking your gate," he corrected. We sat in silence for a moment, watching the steam curl. I realized how steady my breathing had become. "You'll come back?" I asked. Matthew smiled. "When the time's right. I don't enter every fight, Ray, but I show up when records matter more than voices." The choir flyer fluttered as someone opened the door. A gust of cold hit our table, ruffling the napkin with its statutes. Ellen reached to steady it. "If they play with rules," she said, "we'll answer with records." Her voice was firm, no tremor. The pancake steam faded, but something heavier filled the air resolve. At 3:15 a.m., the trail cam blinked red. I only knew because the little indicator light strobed on the laptop inside our kitchen, reflecting against the dark window like a heartbeat. I rubbed my eyes, leaned closer, and there she was. Linda herself, caught in the pale wash of infrared. Umbrella, tilted hair tucked under a hood, she raised her hand and stapled a notice to my gatepost. The camera clicked quietly, each frame etching truth in pixels. She looked both ways as though the night belonged to her alone, then pressed the paper flat against the wood. A trespass, plain as day, but more than that, it was evidence. Rain tapped steadily against the gutters outside, a soft metronome to my disbelief. I opened the porch door and stepped into the damp night. The swing creaked as I leaned past it. My driveway stretched ghostly under the yard light, the gatepost wet and gleaming. There, flapping under a staple, was the notice. I pulled it free. The paper was damp but legible. Effective immediately. Use of this drive is restricted to HOA board discretion. At the bottom, her signature in brisk pen strokes a borrowed authority that didn't reach as far as she believed. I let the silence stretch. My heart thumped not with rage but with the sober weight of knowing the line had cracked. The deed's seal still sat in my strongbox, but here was its counterweight, a paper illegitimate but posted boldly, daring me to object. Prop number 2 had shown its fracture. Inside, Ellen was waiting, robe pulled tight, her eyes reflecting the glow of the laptop feed. She didn't even hesitate. She whispered. "No," I said, laying the notice flat on the table. Water dripped from its edges, dotting the wood. "She wants a record, too. A false one." Ellen touched the corner of the page, lips pressed thin. "Then, let's keep the better one." I nodded and slid the SD card from the camera into my pocket. The camera saw what no denial can erase. The next morning I drove into town. The sheriff's cruiser idled in front of the courthouse, dew beating across its hood. Deputy Haynes stepped out, coffee in one hand, brows lifting when he saw the notice clutched in mine. "Morning, Ray. That looks official. It looks," I said evenly, "like trespass in ink." I handed him the notice, then pulled the trail cam card from my pocket. "And I've got proof. She posted this herself, 3:15 sharp." Haynes glanced at the card. "Video, still shots. Time stamped." He gave a low whistle. "That'll cut louder than talk." We stood by the cruiser. Rainwater dripped from the courthouse eaves, plinking steadily on the concrete. A passing farmer tipped his cap. Haynes raised a hand in return. The world kept moving, but for me the air felt thinner, tight with waiting. "Here's what I can do," Haynes said, tucking the notice into a plastic sleeve. "We'll log this, might even draft an injunction if the county attorney signs off. That's all I've wanted, paper answering paper. You'll get it," he said. "Truth glows brighter than their lock sign." His words rang like a bell. A viral quote if there ever was one, though Haynes didn't mean it that way. By afternoon, Ellen and I sat on the porch swing watching the rain taper to mist. I held the sheriff's draft, a formal injunction request, typed clean, unsigned but poised. The language was steady: trespass, interference, unlawful posting. Ellen read aloud, voice quiet but sure. "It feels heavier than all their notices put together." "It is," I said, "because this one carries weight beyond the cul-de-sac." She leaned back, swing creaking. "Do you think they know what they've woken?" I looked out at the wet gatepost, the staple still gleaming where Linda's hand had pressed it in. Not yet, but they will. Night fell again, slow and damp. The gutters ticked faint drops, steady as a clock. My driveway gleamed dark and patient under the yard lamp. And on the laptop screen, the saved frame of Linda's trespass glowed back at me, frozen proof that her reach had overstepped. I whispered to myself, steady, deliberate. The camera saw what no denial could erase. They called it an emergency meeting and printed the word in bold across a sheet of cardstock on the clubhouse bulletin board. The only emergency from where I stood was my driveway and their pride. Inside, the room smelled like coffee and someone's tuna casserole sweating under foil. Folding chairs marched in rows. At the back, a long table held name tags and a stack of rules. At the front, the wall was blank and white, waiting for a projector's light like a stage waits for its first note. Linda sat at the center of the board table in a coral blazer gavel placed too close to her hand. "We'll begin," she said. "There has been confusion, regrettable confusion about safety standards near Maple and 3rd. Confusion, I said from the second row. You taped a restriction to my mailbox and posted one on my gate post at 3:15 in the morning." She glanced past me. "Sir, you'll have your turn." "Arthur," the chair cleared his throat. "We'll hear from Mr. Ray Jordan after the board presents." A young man eased a laptop onto the lectern. The projector hummed, throwing a blue rectangle onto the wall. Linda began a practiced slide about sightline harmony and aesthetic continuity words I'd come to recognize as trouble in their Sunday clothes. I held my folder like a life preserver. When my turn finally came, I stood, walked to the front, and set my own laptop on the table. My hands were steady. I plugged in the HDMI cable and watched the blue rectangle become my driveway clean ordinary hours. "This is a simple story," I said, voice calm enough to surprise me. "A driveway used for 30 years. A late-night posting without bylaw citation. And a pattern of communication that replaces numbers with adjectives." I clicked. The slide changed to a scan of the plat and the dotted line visible but labeled Access Only. I clicked again. The trail cam still frame appeared time-stamped 03-15-08. Linda's umbrella tilted as her hand pressed paper to wood. A murmur skittered across the folding chairs. "Next," I said, and brought up the stamped emails, county correspondence, certified receipts, the HOA gentle reminders annotated in red boxes. In the corner of each slide, the recorder's blue seal. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The stamps spoke in a register even pride had to hear. "One clean receipt beats 10 loud rumors," I said, and let the line hang. The room shifted. Someone coughed. Foil rustled at the casserole table. Linda leaned toward the mic. "This is misleading. The easement impacts safety, and the board must exercise discretion. Show us the bylaw," a man in a ball cap called from the back. Linda lifted the printed covenants and read a sentence about harmonious appearance. She didn't read a number. She didn't have one to read. I advanced to the next slide, a side-by-side my driveway, the dotted line labeled. Then the email, with discretion highlighted. Under both the statute Matthew had scrawled on a diner napkin, and I had since pulled from the state site in clean type, "No easement shall unreasonably restrict access to property conveyed by deed." "Neighbors," I said, turning to the rows, "I want what you want for your porches and your mailboxes, a fair rule that names itself. If they can do this to a driveway with adjectives, they can do it to a ramp, a handrail, a flag." Foil rustled again. Then, without prompting, June stood. She held up a manila envelope. "Garden gnome," she said. "Fined for being 2 inches too tall. Scale and harmony." I paid it because they used words that sounded official. A few people nodded. The man in the ball cap lifted his hand. Last month they cited my teen for a bicycle leaning on the porch. A woman near the aisle added, "We were told to repaint our door because the shade wasn't optimally welcoming. We had the swatch from your approved palette." I didn't smile. I didn't need to. The room was telling its own story now. I clicked again. The slide cut back to receipts, certified mail with green tags, the county seal, the sheriff's log number for my report. I kept my narration just behind the images the way a bass guitar holds the song without show. Our driveway is concrete, I said, but it's also access. And access sits under a deed with a seal older than any blazer I see up here. A few laughs came low, then died quickly. I let the quiet spread until it met every wall. The projector hummed the only sound, followed by 3 seconds in which nobody moved. It was the shortest silence I've ever felt stretch so far. Applause began in the middle row, uncertain, then firm. Hands lifted, not like weapons, but like people counting themselves present. Linda reached for the gavel and tapped, but the clapping ran right over the wood. Arthur raised both palms. The room settled. "Thank you, Mr. Jordan," he said. He looked at his colleagues, then back to the rows. His tie had sagged to one side the way ties do when they've decided to belong to the person instead of the rule. "We have heard testimony," he continued, "and seen evidence." "Stamped evidence," June said, not quite loud enough to be a shout. Arthur swallowed. In light of tonight's materials, slides, emails with county seals, and the sheriff's report, I think it would be appropriate to Linda's eyes cut to him. Arthur, to place on the agenda, he pushed on whether this temporary restriction should continue. I closed my laptop and rested my palm on its warm lid. The casserole table gave a metallic ping as the foil finally released its steam. I thought of Matthew's diner map arrows pointing to words that didn't care about anyone's blazer. "Do we need to reconsider this ban tonight?" Arthur asked. The teller window had a little sign that read, "Please have your ID ready," as if identity could be proven by plastic. The clerk behind the glass leaned forward when she saw the paper I slid beneath the slot. "Sir," she said, voice low enough to make the pen on its chain stop swinging. "By court order, the HOA's accounts are frozen." "For how long?" I asked. "Until the audit concludes, or the court modifies the order." She glanced at the injunction in my hand, the seal catching the bank's fluorescent light. "No disbursements, no reimbursements." "I'm sorry." "Don't be," I said. "You didn't pour concrete into my driveway." She pressed her lips together like a person trying not to agree too loudly. "We'll flag all outgoing transactions," she said. "It'll show in the ledger immediately." Behind me, a small line shuffled forward. I stepped aside, reading the language again. Temporary injunction, enjoining the HOA from accessing, transferring, or encumbering funds pending independent audit. The judge's name was neat as a schoolteacher's. The clerk stamped a copy for my records and slid it back under the glass. "Freeze the funds. Thaw the truth," she said softly, like it was just something you say when you love a good policy. I tucked the paper away. That's exactly the plan. Outside, the courthouse steps were still damp from a morning sprinkle. I stood there a moment and let the air rinse out the bank's recycled chill. Matthew had texted me an hour earlier. Order granted. Keep calm, paper only. He didn't need to add the rest, no gloating, no speeches. Formal notice does its own talking. At the end of the block, the clubhouse door stood open. Voices echoed off the lobby tile. I crossed the green, the injunction copy warm against my chest inside the folder, and stepped inside to the front desk. "Can I help you?" the receptionist asked. "I need to file a copy with the treasurer," I said, "and with the secretary for the minutes." She took the paper and read the first paragraph. Her eyebrows climbed. "Oh, covers it," I said. "Please note receipt." She date-stamped a little card and clipped it to a copy. The pen on its chain scratched the line with a satisfying finality. From the hallway, Linda's voice approached brisk and clipped. "We can't just stop cutting checks. We have landscaping. We have a balloon payment on the clubhouse AC. The treasurer said something about operational necessity." I didn't catch the words, only the tone of someone discovering that the machine they push every week had found a gear they didn't install. Linda turned the corner and stopped short when she saw me. "Ray," she said, "we were just—" "How did you bank?" told me. I said, "Keeping it even." "The court told them." "That can't be right." She reached for the receptionist's copy. "On what basis?" "On the basis of our records," I said. "Trail cam, notices, certified receipts, and your postings without bylaw citations." Her cheeks flushed deeper than the coral blazer. "We're conducting a safety review," she said. "You forced our hand." "I forced nothing. The order simply keeps the ledger honest while an auditor looks. You'll appreciate the clarity." The treasurer, a careful man who always wore loafers without socks, held out his hands as if proximity might warm them. "We have obligations." "Then you'll document them," I said. "The order allows reasonable maintenance with auditor approval. It denies discretionary outflows until your books match your bylaws." Linda looked past me to the receptionist. "We need to pay the mowing contract by Friday." The receptionist held up the stamped card as neutral as the moon. "All requests must go through the auditor." Linda fixed her eyes on me. "You did this." "Records did this," I said. "I just carried them." She jabbed a finger toward the office. "We'll see about that." We all drifted into the small conference room. The treasurer opened the ledger, thick, well-thumbed, the kind of book people trust because it's heavy. He clicked his pen and poised it over the line for disbursements general. Nothing moved. "Go ahead," Linda said. He looked at the receptionist's stamped card at my injunction, then at Linda. He didn't write. "Try to submit it," she said, already impatient. He opened the laptop and typed into the accounting software. A red banner popped up. "Hold, court-ordered freeze pending audit authorization." The room quieted in an instant. Even the copier in the hall decided to be still. "Override," Linda said. "There is no override." The treasurer said more to the screen than to any of us. "That's ridiculous," she said. "We can't run a community on holds and stamps." "You've been running it on discretion," I said. "This is what standards look like." Silence hugged the table for a long beat. I heard the air conditioning kick on and thought of a July bill they wouldn't be paying without telling someone why. I tucked the injunction back into my folder and stepped out before the argument found a rhythm it could enjoy. On the courthouse steps again, I sat for a minute and let the heat soak through my shirt. I could hear traffic from Maple, that steady mid-afternoon murmur of people going where they've always gone. My phone buzzed. "Matthew, nice work. No victory lap. Porch swing tonight." Me, porch swing always. Dusk settled like a hand on the shoulder. Ellen and I sat side by side, the swing creaking in a slow waltz. I read the order aloud one more time, not because I needed to hear it, but because the words were weighty in a way that made dignity feel like something you could hold. "Freeze the funds. Thaw the truth," I said. Ellen smiled. "You going to embroider that on a pillow? Maybe on a ledger?" We listened to cicadas to a neighbor's screen door, to our own breathing. The gate latch clicked once as the evening cooled and the metal changed its mind about size. Somewhere a dog barked and then forgot why. When the porch light drew a small circle on the walk, we went inside. I set the injunction in the folder next to the plat, and the notice then slid the drawer closed with a sound like a period at the end of a sentence you've rewritten 3 times to get it right. In the morning, I returned to the clubhouse just as the treasurer was opening the ledger. Linda stood over him, pen in hand, the line for disbursements general waiting like a blank check. She placed the tip to paper and looked for motion that wouldn't come. Her pen hovered over an empty ledger that wouldn't move. The ledger opened, and the room went as quiet as a church before the first hymn. Pages that once seemed like dull arithmetic now carried the weight of confession. The auditor, a silver-haired woman from the county, adjusted her glasses. "We'll begin with fine assessments," she said. Her voice was steady measured, but the effect on the rows of folding chairs was electric. Linda sat stiff arms folded. The treasurer fumbled with his pen, clicking and unclicking like a nervous metronome. "The record shows," the auditor continued, "that over the last 3 years, more than half of assessed fines have no corresponding bylaw citation." She pointed to a highlighted line. "Garden ornament penalties. Driveway, use exterior paint shades, all levied under undefined clauses." June, 2 rows back, pressed her lips together, knuckles white around her envelope. I thought of the gnome she'd been forced to shrink. The auditor turned a page. Additionally, funds collected were applied to discretionary expenses without recorded approval. Landscaping contracts, travel reimbursements, and in one case, catered luncheons. A murmur spread through the room louder than any hymn, but still carried the cadence of disbelief. Ellen leaned close and whispered, "They wrote rules in pencil and checks in pen." I nodded, and now both are under the light. The ledger itself seemed to echo. Every line item she read was a bell rung in daylight. My boundary marker from Chapter 1, my deed's seal. The injunction, those were tools of proof. But this was the echo prop nar 2, fully revealed, bouncing back louder than the original strike. On the wall, a poster for the choir rehearsal fluttered as if stirred by unseen breath. Someone had taped the potluck sign-up sheet below it, casserole dishes promised in neat handwriting. The bulletin board felt like a reminder community is supposed to mean sharing, not extracting. The auditor cleared her throat. "The board will issue refunds for improperly assessed fines. Checks will be drawn once the freeze is reviewed and approved." A hush fell so deep I heard my own pulse. And then, as if choreographed, several neighbors stood and placed hands over their hearts. Not a pledge, more like a gesture of quiet dignity. For 3 seconds, the silence was whole, reverent. Then came the clap, sharp and collective, spilling forward like a wave. Linda tapped her gavel. "Please, decorum." But the sound kept going, a rhythm of relief. Ed, the retired machinist, stood and raised his voice. "Equal rules. That's all we asked. If my fence needs citing, cite it. If Ray's driveway is in question, show the statute. But no more discretion." Applause rolled again. Linda looked to the treasurer, who seemed smaller under the fluorescent hum. The auditor closed the ledger and rested her palm on it. "When a ledger speaks," she said, "a neighborhood listens." The words landed heavy and clean. Viral material, though she hadn't intended it. I glanced around. Faces worn by years of dues and quiet compliance now glowed with something else: recognition, maybe even hope. The bylaws excerpt was projected next Article 4, Section 7, defining what fines could be applied. Clear as glass, but blank, where so many of our penalties had been written. "The minutes will reflect this finding," the auditor said. "Improper assessments identified. Refunds to be scheduled." I scribbled the line in my notebook. The minutes captured what rumors never could: "We heard you." For once, it was not my voice that mattered most. It was the collective. The meeting closed not with a bang, but with neighbors lingering, comparing notes, signing the potluck list with lighter hands. June hugged her envelope to her chest as though it finally weighed less. Ed shook my hand firmly. Ellen pressed her palm against mine, and for a moment we both felt steady. As we stepped out into the night, the choir inside began to rehearse, voices lifting. The echo carried through the open window, folding into the applause still alive in my ears. They held the ceremony on the lawn by the flagpole, where the ground dips a little and the grass grows thicker. The clerk from the county stood with a folder and a portable mic, the cord snaking toward a small speaker set on a folding chair. She cleared her throat, and the choir already gathered under the live oaks fell quiet. By order of the court, she read, voice carrying clean across the green, the transfer of authority is hereby recorded. The previous board is relieved. The interim board, she looked up at the line of neighbors facing us, is seated. Hands rose. Some trembled, most didn't. A few people laughed softly the way people laugh when a fever finally breaks. The clerk nodded to Arthur, less a chair now than a patient man with a clipboard, and he stepped forward with a second page. This is the refund schedule, he said. Amounts due are posted by lot number. Checks will be available at the clubhouse after Sunday service. He pinned the schedule to the bulletin board they'd rolled out for the occasion. The paper shook once in the light breeze and held. Someone behind me whispered, "They actually did it." "Not they," Ellen said. "We." BBQ smoke arrived late, drifting up from the potluck grills like a benediction. Somewhere beyond the crowd, a child laughed. The choir hummed a single note to find itself and then stopped, waiting for the next cue. I felt the day balance on that pause. Matthew had taken a place off to the side, hands in pockets, a small, satisfied half-smile that said he'd rather be at a diner but would accept a lawn. He caught my eye and tipped his chin toward the clerk's folder. The clerk lifted the final page. "And this," she said, "is the order lifting the freeze as the audit concludes and refunds are posted. Maintenance expenditures proceed by policy, not discretion." A low sound moved through the crowd, not applause yet, but the soft exhale of a group remembering how to breathe together. Linda stood a little apart, arms folded, eyes narrowed at the paper as if it were a distant storm she'd predicted wrong. I didn't look long. Some distances don't need closing. Arthur turned to me. "Mr. Jordan," he said into the mic, "if you'd like to say I'm fine," I said, keeping my voice low. "Let the paper talk." But he insisted, hand extended. I stepped up, not because I like microphones, but because the lawn and the smoke and the neighbors made silence feel like hiding. "Thank you," I said, and let the one clean word do most of the work. I'll keep it short. 3 lines. I held up my folder, the same one that had grown thick with stamps and receipts and a print of a dotted line that no longer frightened me. First, I said, you can argue opinions forever. You shouldn't have to argue access. A murmur, warmer than any I'd heard in that room. Second, rules deserve numbers. A chuckle. Even Linda allowed herself the ghost of a nod. Third, I said, legacy is access you don't have to argue for. The choir director lifted his hand the way only choir directors can and gave us a soft chorus with no words, just breath turned into pitch. People turned toward the grills, toward the tables that had been quiet for months, and then all at once weren't. The clerk closed her folder and handed a smaller envelope to me, a certified copy of the transfer order. The seal flashed in the sun. "Keep this," she said, "with the others." "I will." I told her. Ellen tugged my sleeve. "Come see," she said, eyes bright. She led me to the edge of the lawn where a black cloth hung over a small post sunk in fresh concrete. June found the cord. "Ready?" she asked. "Ready," I said, though my throat wasn't sure. She pulled. The cloth came away, and the plaque caught the last light like it had been waiting for it specifically. Maple and 3rd. Right of access. Recorded 2024 Community Kept. For a long beat, nobody spoke. Hands rose, not to clap yet, but to hover for a second over chests the way people do when the simple thing turns out to be the holy one. The wind shifted the flag once, and then the clapping found itself and ran on. Matthew leaned in. "You did this with paper, Ray," he said, quiet enough for only me. "And patience." "We did it," I said. "You drew the map." "Barely legible," he said, smiling. "Napkin law is a dangerous field. We ate on paper plates, the kind that fold if you don't respect them. I tasted baked beans." Someone's famous slaw, a chicken thigh with char lines so neat they could have been ruled. People came by not in a line but in a slow orbit, saying things like "thank you," and "I didn't know," and "my husband's ramp." I nodded until nodding felt like a language. When it thinned, Ellen and I walked home. The sky had started to take on that Indiana purple that pretends it's going to rain and then just settles for drama. At the gate, I set the envelope with the transfer order on the porch rail. The latch, stubborn all week, clicked shut by reflex, then loosened with the evening's cool and opened under my hand. We stood there, not going in yet, not staying out, just letting the swing's shadow sway across the walk. "Feels different," Ellen said. "It is different," I said. The concrete didn't change. We did. She took the envelope, slid the certified copy into our folder past the plat, the notices, the ledger freeze, and the audit summary. It sat there heavier than paper should be. "What next?" she asked. "Next is ordinary," I said. "Leave it that way as long as it will stay." We walked to the driveway and stopped for no practical reason. I traced the hairline crack that had been there for years, the one that refuses to widen or vanish. I pressed my palm to the warm surface. My hand came away with a little dust the color of habit. Back on the lawn, neighbors were packing up. The choir sent one more wordless line into the air high enough to make me look up. The flag slipped once. The plaque took one last glint and then relaxed into evening. I lifted the latch again, just to hear it, and guided the gate through its small arc. It answered like a good hinge answers, with work not opinion. The latch clicked shut, then open. A good key doesn't just open a gate, it keeps a promise. I woke before dawn, stepping onto my porch swing, only to find a notice taped to my mailbox telling me I could no longer use my own driveway. She, the HOA president, had decided overnight that what I'd poured concrete for 30 years ago was suddenly off limits. My cousin, a county prosecutor, looked over the bylaws and the stamped seal, and he moved fast, freezing their bank accounts before they could touch another dollar. That morning was only the beginning. Let me take you back.